All right, welcome back. Here we are. We're in Chapter 5. Now, Chapter 5 deals with the .NET framework. And I'm not going to dig super deep into .NET, and I'm not going to require you to do anything hands-on with .NET. And the rationale behind that is that in the beginning I said, look, you can use Visual Code, Visual Studio Code, or Visual Studio .NET. And Visual Studio Code does not have all of the resources that the .NET framework has. So .code doesn't, or Visual Studio Code is different than .NET. But we're going to talk about .NET and uh, what makes .NET different than Visual Studio Code. And essentially, it's the libraries we have available to us. The dynamic link libraries in the .NET framework are more robust. There's more there that we can use, more tools available to us, if you will. Think about it like Visual Studio Code is like having a tool belt, and all the only tools you got are the ones that are in the tool belt. Visual Studio .NET, you've got an entire shop full of toolboxes and a lot of tools at your disposal to perform a lot of different tasks. That's our primary difference. Okay. So, essentially, pop through this, we have a target framework that we're going to use, whatever .NET framework that may be. And think about it like, I compared DLLs to libraries, and the books are like the classes that are in there, and they give us the ability to do things and store values and whatever it may be. Not all libraries are the same. And depending on the version of .NET, it's like saying, yeah, this is a small little rural library. There's not a whole lot there. This is a monstrous library in New York City that has been around for centuries, and the stuff that's there is just amazing. So depending on how recent the .NET version is will dictate how big the toolbox, or are we talking about a bunch of toolboxes, or are we talking about a very updated shop to where we've got a lot of tools available to us. So we point to our target framework. We're using .NET version 8, 3.1, 7. Which one are we dealing with? Right? And we are explicit about that. Now, some of you may have run into problems in the LinkedIn learning exercise early on. And there's a README file that goes along with the instructions in that LinkedIn learning course that says you need to go in and change the target framework on the starter code to align with your framework that you're using. So if you were using an older version, you would have to go into the code and point to the target framework that you have installed on your device. Okay? It's something we've got to explicitly do it. And the reason we've got to explicitly do it is as we've gone through different versions of C# .NET or Visual Studio .NET and C# in it, one of the things that they've changed in the last decade is the file folder structure where our project exists within that file structure. It, in previous iterations of, I think, .NET.6, it was in a different place than it is now. And what would happen if you didn't change how you were doing things and you went to go in and do your work, and one of the things you've realized up to this point is that, wow, in C#, it's not just one file. And I said, all I need is the CS. Well, if we're dealing with .NET, it becomes, in many instances, far bigger than just the CS. It's the entire project. But all I really wanted to see was just your CS code. I want to go in and see the CS code, and then I can create, because it's a command line, a console app, I can make do with that and create the shell to house that, or the project to house that, and do what I need to do. If we're talking about an entire project and you're pointing to the wrong framework, it's not going to open. It's going to be problematic. So, like I said, in that LinkedIn Learning, they were explicit about it. They said, look, we've got versions here for these specific versions of .NET. These different frameworks. We've got this covered, we got this covered. But if it's not these, you need to go in and point to whatever you've got. And you need to go in and change, essentially, this. If the one they gave you was pointing to 7 and you got 8, you need to go change it, point to 8. Because if you don't, there's going to be some problems. That code was built using tools in 8. And if you only have a toolbox, version 6, the framework, I keep saying, I call it toolbox, that's why our frameworks are like a toolbox. Oh, I got an old toolbox, I don't have any of those new tools. Ooh, it's not going to work. Okay. So conceptually, we should be good with this and understand the syntax associated with how to call or point to the different frameworks and our target framework. It's fairly straightforward. Okay. We're using C#12. That's .NET. Runtime of 8. Back C10 was 6. 6 and 8 are, as I said, distinctly different. Okay. What exists in them, and we saw in the first module all the differences between the different frameworks, the different versions of C#, or the different versions of C#, as you see here, they tie to different frameworks. So they're not backward compatible. If you've got version 6 installed on your machine, you're not going to be able to successfully open up stuff that was created for version 12. You may be able to go make some modifications to it and it may open up, but depending on the resources that are used, it may not do what you think it's going to do. Okay. So we've got a variety of different collections. Think of collections. We'll talk about collections more in Chapter 7. Think about collections like when you go into the library, here's different collections in the library. So think about it from that standpoint, and we'll talk about it more later on. Now, XML and JSON are formats for transferring data, or getting data to the app or from the app. And it's think about it's how the data is packaged up for the program to interact with it. Okay. We'll likely deal with that in the last module. We'll see which module I get us to, or what chapter we deal with in that last module. At the time of me recording this, I haven't decided yet. I've got us laid out all the way to module 9. And that's where we'll deal with our, as I said previously, our mobile devices. Okay. You'll have a comprehensive project in module 10, group project. That's your final project. Has the same weight as any of the other projects, so it's not like it's 20% of your grade or 30 or 40% of your grade. I've had comprehensive final projects in classes that I've taken in the past few years that were 40% of the course grade, and I'm just not a firm believer in that. I still stick with my whole had a bad day idea that we can all have a bad day, and if your bad day is the day you took the final, man, you put a whole lot of time and work in just to have one bad day, and it shouldn't happen that way. All right, I digress. So we've got a number of different utilities, if you will, collections that we can connect to within the system itself. So system.net, well, that's us interacting with the network aspect of our operating system. And our operating system has ports 80, 80, 80 to interact with HTTP clients. So we have to use those resources in the system to be able to perform those tasks. If we're dealing with, it's a network broadly, network specifically at HTTP, and if we want to send an email, SMTP, that will be the system.net.mail. Okay. So depending on what it is we need to do, the different namespaces that we're going to have to access, here they are, different ways to get at them. All right. And it goes on from chapter to chapter to chapter. Like I said, there's so much in this book, so much there available if you want to go spend the time going through it. As you get familiar with the different namespaces, the different collections that you can interact with, the best analogy is it's like a tool that now you know how to use it without getting hurt. Or it's, oh, I read that book. I can tell you about it. I know about that book. Conceptually, same thing as you go through and interact with these different collections or namespaces. Whether it's security, there's so much that we've got available to us. All right. Like I said, I'm not going to dig deep into this. We talk about thin clients, and we're not going to deal with thin clients either. All right. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. This is not a heavy module. All right. If you haven't done so already, you need to have, now you had group membership done before. For this module, tasks wise, I have the reading for you, I've got the lecture for you, I've got some resources for you. No big heavy lifting in this module. So we've got the discussion, we've got a quiz, same as or similar to previous quiz that's coming off of the foundational modules 2, 3, maybe a little bit from 4. And then reflection. Open book, open notes, open internet, whatever you need, it's available to you for the quizzes. Right? You go back and retake it as many times as you want before the due date. Right? So, with that said, we'll see you in Module 6. We've got big things to come in the coming modules.